So this is the video for 2.1, which is writing and graphing inequalities. So hopefully this is not anything that is brand new to you. Hopefully you've seen this before, other than what we did in class, but you should have seen something similar to this in 8th grade. But if you didn't, then we did it today in class, and hopefully you're here reviewing this video now. So we're going to start by looking at just writing an inequality given a word problem and then graphing it after you write it. Okay, so at the top of your notes you have this little concept summary chart, and this was just a review of the different parts, and that is that the less than symbol looks like this. It's the one that points to the left, and if we're looking for all numbers that are less than 2, that would be an open circle on 2 because it doesn't include that value, and then everything to the left of that number on the number line. If we use the greater than symbol, that's the one that looks like this. It points to the right. And once again, since it doesn't include the value 2, it's an open circle on 2, and that'd be everything to the right of that number. When you have less than or equal to and greater than or equal to, those are the ones that have the little line under the inequality symbol. So less than or equal to 2 means including 2 and all the numbers less than that or smaller. And greater than or equal to 2 would be a closed circle on 2 because it includes that value and everything to the right on a number line. So let's look at 2 examples from your notes. On this one, the statement says the temperature T in Sweden is at least negative 10 degrees Celsius. So our key word here is at least. So if you think about what that means, the word at least means that it would be negative 10 or more. So T would have to be greater than or equal to negative 10. Okay? If you think about the scenario in a real world way, if it's at least that, that means it's that or more. Okay? So to graph that, since it is the greater than or equal to, I know that negative 10 is part of my solution set, so I'm going to graph that with a colored in circle. And then I want all the numbers bigger than that. So those are all the numbers to the right of negative 10. Okay? All right, why don't you pause and see if you can do the second one on your own. For the next one, the key word was at most. That means it's that number or less. That means it's the highest it could be. So my inequality would be E is less than or equal to 2,407. Since we're using the less than or equal to, I know that's a closed circle. Now notice my number line doesn't have, it goes by thousands. So I know that 2,407 is a little less than halfway between 2,000 and 3,000. So I put a closed circle, and then my arrow is pointing to the left. The next section of your notes, we started focusing on, well, what if they gave me a graph and they want me to write the inequality and put it in words? Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the first one. So for A, I notice that I have a closed circle and I'm pointing to the right. So we're going to start with our variable, because remember we're talking about all real numbers, and so we do that by using x. So I know that x had to be greater than or equal to. I know it's equal to because of the closed circle, and I know it's greater than because it's pointing to the right. And then it's greater than or equal to 1 because that's the number that we dealt with. So in words, that would be all real numbers greater than or equal to 1. Okay? Now another thing that I told you guys that might help you is if you look at the end of your arrow that points to the right, it points the same way as your symbol. So if you're having a hard time with your inequalities, notice that the end of my arrow looks like this. It points to the right, and look at your inequality. It also points to the right. Okay? That only works when your variable's on the left. Okay, so why don't you pause and see if you can do B. Notice we have an open circle on 1, so think about what that would do to our inequality. So for this next one, notice the graph is very similar to A, but for B, I had an open circle on 1. So I had all real numbers, or x, is greater than 1. So that means it doesn't include 1, but it includes 1.00001. Okay, so it's like the lower boundary. And then I wrote that out. All real numbers greater than 1. All right, let's look at C. So for C, I'm going to do this in blue. I notice that now my arrow or my line, my segment is pointing to the left. So I know that X has to be less than, and notice it's a closed circle, so less than or equal to 1. And how would you say that in words? You would say all real numbers less than or equal to 1. Okay, why don't you pause and see if you can do D. So once again, D was very similar of C, and that means that my boundary was still 1, but this time it doesn't include it because it's the open circle, so I know that X was less than 1, which would be all real numbers less than 1. Okay, so for this last section of our notes, we looked at whether or not values were solutions of inequalities. So we talked about the fact that a solution means that if I put -4 in for X and then I say the statement, it would have to be true in order to be a solution. So what we're doing is we're just plugging in and evaluating. So I'm going to do A up here at the top. So it says X plus 8 is less than -3. So if X was -4, so -4 plus 8 is less than -3 is the question that we're asking ourselves. Well, -4 plus 8 is 4, and the question is 4 less than -3? And the answer is no. So I know that on A, that -4 is not a solution. Okay, why don't you go ahead and do 3, 4, and 5. So pause the video and then you can check your work with mine. Okay, so for these problems, once again, all I did, this time we were looking to see if -6 was a solution. So everywhere I saw the variable, I plugged in a -6 and solved. So we talked a little bit about calculator use and integers today in class. So just be very careful when you're evaluating expressions, if you are using a calculator, that you're entering exactly as it's written. So if it was 3 minus -6, make sure you put 3 minus -6. 3 minus -6, if you have a minus minus, it becomes a plus. And 3 plus 6 is 9. 10 is not less than or equal to 9. So that's why this one is a no. Whereas over here, -6 plus 4 is -2, and -2 is less than -1. So remember our integers. The further away from 0 I am on the left, the smaller I am. Okay, so that's why this is a yes. And then on the last one, when we evaluate, we get -49 is greater than -2, and that is not true, and that is why that is not a solution on that one. The very last section of your notes, we just reviewed graphing again, so let's go ahead and look at number 6. So for number 6, our boundary is -8. They are saying that B is a number that is greater than -8. Since it's just greater, that means it doesn't include that value, so I'm going to use an open circle, but I want all the numbers to the right of -8. Okay? Now notice on 6, 8, and 9, our variable is on the left. That's going to be the best way to graph these. So for number 7, I'm going to rewrite that. So when you rewrite it, we're going to put G, and so you read it from right to left. So how does G compare to 1.4? Well, G is a number that's less than or equal to 1.4. So when you rewrite, you need to remember to flip your inequality, because you're flipping the inequality when you rewrite it. So now I'm looking for a number that is less than or equal to 1.4. So 1.4 is a little less than halfway between 1 and 2. I know that on this one it's going to be a closed circle because it was equal to, and then I want all the numbers to the left of that. Okay? Alright, for number 8, we have a number that is less than a half. So we know that a half is halfway between 0 and 1. And since it's just less than, I'm going to use that open circle, and I want everything to the left of that. Okay. For number 9, remember this little symbol right here means square root. So v is greater than or equal to the square root of 36, which the square root of 36 is 6. So I know that I go to 6 and I put a closed-in circle on it because of the equal to part, and I want all the numbers to the right of that. Okay, so this was our first lesson for this chapter, and we will be using these skills throughout Chapter 2 when we are solving inequalities. So it's really important that you make sure that you know when to use an open circle, when to use a closed circle, and how to check solutions. If you have any questions, then I hope to see you in tutoring. Have a great night.